Hi, Jaryd Krause, host of the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And wow, I just had an absolutely amazing conversation on the podcast with Mr. Mike Jones from Filtered Media. He's also the founder of the CMO Show podcast. He's an international speaker and has achieved absolutely amazing things with Filtered Media by having clients like Coke, Adobe, Telstra, and so many more people helping their building their businesses and their brand and scaling. And in this episode, Mark and I dig deep into content, providing amazing content, how to do it, and how to do some amazing storytelling, and why storytelling is the foundation of a good brand and the foundation of a great marketing campaign, whether it's content or pay-per-click or direct advertising. Now, in this episode, we dive into so much of that and more. Don't miss out on this episode because it's very, very valuable.
Today's episode is brought to you by Investors Club. Investors Club is a paid members-only marketplace for serious buyers interested in proven businesses that aren't listed anywhere else, because sellers sign a 2-month exclusivity agreement to only list with the membership. Now, there's also no purchase fees or commission, meaning the seller nor the buyer ever pay commission in any deal. Each listing has next level metrics to make due diligence far less time consuming, making it quicker for you to seal the deal. With a membership, you have access to a no fee escrow service, and they have great Q&A support available for both buyers and sellers. I'm a member myself, and a lot of thought and effort has gone into this service. However, there are a limited amount of seats available for this membership, so go and check them out at their URL, which is investors.club. That's investors.club.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And today, I'm very grateful we get to speak to Mark Jones. And Mark, you have been in this space for quite a while. You're a speaker, a keynote speaker, author, and you're running your agency, Filtered Media. I've went out and checked out a lot of what you've done, and I just want to say thank you so much for jumping on and sharing some of your wisdom in this space.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Jaryd, and it's a great opportunity to talk about storytelling, which of course is one of my most favorite things.
I love storytelling and how good it can be for branding, how good it can be for content, and also storytelling within building a culture as well. I've noticed that very important with my own team. So first off, I want to say congrats on the AMI award. Tell me more about how that came to be and what that actually means for you guys.
We're really excited to be awarded for the work we've done on the CMO Show podcast and to get the award for the best marketing, or for content marketing. It's Content Marketing Award, and it's a top rating marketing podcast. So it's actually something we've been doing for about 3 years now, and I think the key to it was we were able to demonstrate the business impact. So at the sort of the top level, it generates about a 3 times return on investment for us as a business, as a marketing agency. And it's a little bit of a secret that I'm happy to share with you, which is that a lot of people in our game, in the marketing communications agency world, we tend to do a lot of marketing, I guess, directly. Yeah. But and you see a bit of social, but a lot of it's who you know. How we've been able to kind of reinvent that wheel is that we invite the guests on our show, those people that we really want to be customers. So it's actually it's a kind of like a networking exercise, but quite obviously you are not making it an overt thing. It's actually relationship building. And so what we do find is that some of our guests become customers, but it's really at their invitation to want to talk more. They come in and they meet the team, they see what we do, they get exposed to our brand and our values, and they say, hey, can we talk more? Maybe you can help me solve my problem. It's actually not unlike the sort of thing that I'm sure goes. Yeah, it's not hardcore at all.
It wouldn't work for a podcast at all because you've got to add value.
Correct.
That's what you're all about.
Correct. And I got to say, one of the other things is that I'm actually a journalist by training. I spent my first bit more than a decade as a professional journalist working in the technology trade press, and then In the States, I actually worked in Silicon Valley for 3 years, and for the Financial Review, I was the IT editor for 2 years. And so at my core, at my heart, my first love is telling stories, is writing, producing content. And so when I came into the agency world, you know, I just had to keep doing something, right, that was connected to creating content, adding value, interviewing, and all that sort of thing. So I think, you know, it's actually been a very natural thing for us with the CMO show to sort of bring all of those things together.
Yeah, certainly. And I want to touch on storytelling, and that's going to be a big part of what we'll talk about here. But more so, you know so much about content. You've been in this content space for a while as a journalist. And I'm very similar with my podcast and everybody that I'm teaching to scale their businesses is to make sure they put out very valuable content, because it's such an effective marketing strategy. But marketing as a whole is realistically what you're saying when you get people on your podcast is building relationships. And if you can do that through your content with good storytelling, it's very, very effective. So say for someone who just bought a business, where would be the best place for them to start creating content? Where should they be publishing it? What audience, and how should they be thinking about how they consume it and all that sort of stuff as well?
Well, actually, I wouldn't start so much with the tactics there. I'd say you got to really understand your strategy. Why are you doing it in the first place? And there's a kind of an expectation we sometimes set up is that I'm going to publish this blog article and then customers are going to come flooding through the door. And realistically, that's just not going to happen. It might happen kind of once in a blue moon, but really, content is a long-term game. So you need to be very clear on your brand, your identity, what your goals are as a business. And how can I put myself in front of my customers? So that actually means traditional stuff like networking, getting out and about, setting up coffees, and learning as much as you can about the market space. And so then you need to start putting together a content strategy that will help you achieve those goals. And one of the key things you got to remember is, we're talking about relationships, is the most important thing you can do when you're setting up your strategy is recognize that you are building an audience. And how do you get an audience? You obviously create content that is of interest and relevant and adds value to them. But think to yourself, how can I invite them back? How can I build an ongoing relationship? So we do that through subscriptions. How can I own the subscriptions in the sense of collecting email addresses? You see it on social all the time, of course. People want you to like whatever the content is, and, you know, share my podcast and all that kind of good stuff. At the core of it is this CRM, right? You need to be understanding who are these people. And actually, a bit of a hat tip to a friend of mine, Andrew Davis, who is a speaker in the States. He talks about this concept of how can I monetize this this audience, and what we mean by that is, how can you attribute future sales to people in your database? At a most simplistic level, that can look a little bit like figuring out dollars per subscriber. So let's say you've got 1,000 people on your email list, and you're getting $10,000 a month. Then you can pretty quickly do the maths as to what the value of your per subscriber, what that's worth to you. So as you start building out your business, you can start seeing how content in aggregate, how repeat views, how the comments and likes, everything all starts to work together to feed this growing set of subscribers. And obviously, if you're providing value to them, they're going to recommend your content. They're going to engage with you further. And at that sort of classic marketing funnel level, they're going to start moving down as they start seeing more and more value. So if you have that big picture, long-term perspective, that will set you up for success.
And yeah, so talking about the difference between long-term versus short-term, which is micro versus macro, it's a great approach, because it can take so much time to start building a relationship where you can gain trust from people that may want to work for you. It's like you're building up a bank account of trust. And when you first start, building up that bank account, you don't have much trust or credit in trust. And when you come to a point where you say, hey, there's an offer here that I'd like to, suggest to you, it's not going to be as desirable, or it's going to be something that client or customer may go for, because that bank account of credit in trust hasn't really started gaining momentum yet. And I feel that's a really important thing for people to understand when they're starting to scale their website businesses, is that,
yes,
like, think about the macro, think about building a relationship, just like what you do when you're having a phone call and it's a podcast. It's adding value to not just them, but to your audience. And then if something comes from it, great. If not, later down the track, something may eventuate. And I think that macro is really important.
Yeah.
What I like to incorporate in adding value is telling stories, because that's a big way that people start to understand the value that you're sharing. Sometimes I could just say to somebody, hey, you should do this, go away and do it. But if I don't wrap that around with a story in why they should do it and how valuable it can be to them to do so, they're not going to value that enough to go away and do it. So I think storytelling is where a big part of this comes in, to explain, this is what I've done and what I've noticed in my life, in my business and with other clients, and it's worked for them because of this, this, and this. I feel that may be a good thing for you. So I know that you have a whole book coming out in storytelling, which is coming out shortly, which I'm very excited for. Tell us more about the book, and tell us more about what you feel the importance of storytelling is in your content and growing your business.
Well, thank you. So I think one of the principles of storytelling that really applies anywhere, whether it's written content, whether you're speaking or engaging one-on-one, is actually an attitude of generosity. And I can't emphasize this enough as a way to engage people in your story. And by that, I mean, anytime you're creating content, it's for the other person. And you're thinking, how can I make their day better? What can I share with them that will help them? And if you can position yourself in that kind of way, you're going to find that connection that you speak to is much more quickly established. You're able to build that trust because they can see, actually, this person's here giving something, and they're not expecting something immediately in return. And you can always tell a sales call versus, a relationship. So I wanted to make that point. And to answer your question about the book, it's called Beliefonomics. And I've spent the last 3 or 4 years actually studying what is the heartbeat of storytelling. And talking about this emotion, this sense of generosity, one of the things I discovered is that at the heart of it is we have to appeal to hearts and minds. So we have to understand that it's actually close to 70% emotion and 30% facts. And quite often we get it mixed up. We think people need to know all of the facts, and I'm going to hit them with all of this hard information. But if you have that perspective of, actually, how can I emotionally engage somebody in a story, I'm going to have a far greater impact. So that's one of the principles that I unpack in Beliefonomics.
Yeah, I think that's really 70% versus 30% is like, yeah, we want the information, but we've gone overboard, haven't we? Especially online, it's just like information overload, or they call it the information age, where we forget, like, hang on a second, on the other end of this podcast or on the other end of this article I've written is a human being.
Correct.
And to actually get to them and make sure that this is going to give them the value that I'm trying to explain to them with the information, is that I need to attach that to a story, which can create an emotional anchor for them to understand it and really use that to their benefit. Would you not agree?
I would agree. There's 2 ways you can do it, and I'm just thinking, if you, for example, are running a website, you've got a small business, the concept of storytelling can actually feel quite overwhelming if you're like not something that you've spent a lot of time practicing. Obviously, as a journalist, it's largely second nature. It doesn't take me long.
It's natural.
Yeah. Well, I don't really get writer's block. I just go. But I think one of the things to think is, if you're concerned about telling your own story and you feel hesitant or a bit nervous, one of the things you can do is actually tell someone else's story. So understand who they are. Interview a customer. Find out their background. What's their origin story is one of the most powerful types of stories that you can tell. So how did this whole concept for you come alive? What was the the genesis of this business that you're in, and really try to understand who they are, and then present that as a story that illustrates how you think and feel, how it aligns with your approach. So when I speak about emotions, it's not always, people think it's got to be kind of heartfelt.
Soppy.
Yeah, correct. But actually, as we all know, emotion ranges from the soppy and the sort of crying and everything right through to anger at the extreme. Of course, I'm not advocating anything at that end, but sincerity as another great one, or a sense of wonder, or happiness, joy, all these, the gamut of human emotions. How can you try and tap into those things? And the challenge of anybody who's writing a story, telling a story, is capturing and maintaining attention with your audience. So it's always about that hook, like getting them in. That's, I guess that's kind of where it all begins.
That's the art, and that's a unique thing to be able to do. And I think that really comes with practice. Myself personally, I knew nothing about writing, nothing about stories, and how I got started in this space is that I wanted to make money online. So I started travel blogging, and I forced myself to write stories about me and about myself and about my life. And sometimes I would hit writer's block, and your suggestion is absolutely perfect, where you can write about somebody else's story and link that in to what your product or service is and how that story can be of benefit and value to your customer. So for example, I just started writing more stories as of a couple of weeks ago, and I watched a really amazing documentary. It's by Dr. Ruth, or it is about Dr. Ruth, who is a German lady who fled the Holocaust and has had this amazing life and is one of the best sex therapists in the world, very well renowned. And she is she's friends with a lot of famous people and quite wealthy in what she does, although she's a very, very humble person. And I took a lot of great things from this, and how I relate to what a business owner can be is not putting up a facade of a big ego with the success you have, and just the work ethic that she has when she, you have the ups and downs of being a business owner. The work ethic that she has is she's been through so much more than most of us, yet she's so successful because she can just take that in her stride. And I told her story in a little email and a little post, and it wasn't even about me, but I've related back to what my customers, clients, and audience are going through. And I think that's really important. So I like that idea of, writing about somebody else. What other content ideas do you have in terms of storytelling for the audience?
Well, I'll share with you a key that I use to helping you construct a story and look at the elements. And I call it the story key. So you need a model, a metaphor, and meaning. And I'll just quickly unpack that. So a model can be as simple as a chart, bottom left to top right. Look at this thing that's going up. It can be the classic sort of Venn diagram with the three circles and showing how everything connects. So we kind of get models, and we need a metaphor, which of course is something that, you're saying it's a bit like, I don't know, climbing the mountain, or whatever that visual illustration of your point is. And the key thing is, of course, that you instantly connect a complex idea with a simple one to say, look at the similarities. It helps somebody get it straight away. And you want to choose a metaphor or an analogy that is immediately understood by your target audience. And then meaning is the key thing. That old phrase, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So be very clear on your meaning. What do you mean? And I'm a big fan of this idea. I talk a lot about one article, one idea, one keynote presentation, one idea, one video, one idea, one podcast, one idea. You kind of get my point, right?
Yeah,
so,
the one thing.
Right, don't complicate it. So you need to have a meaning which is, like in this context here, the power of storytelling, for example. So what are you trying to get across? What's your one takeaway point from whatever piece of content or story that you're creating? And make sure that you really make that clear at the beginning and at the end, so that you've kind of wrapped it up. So I call that the story key. And as you bring those elements together, it can really powerfully bring your idea alive.
I like that idea because especially in this day and age, like I said before, there's so much information out there. And when we read something where there's like a plethora of lessons from it, and we're trying to focus on how that can relate to us, we end up catching none of those lessons. It's like if you try and catch 2 rabbits, you end up catching none.
Yeah.
So I like that idea of sticking to the one key takeaway per piece of content. And so people that are listening have just bought a website, or they're looking to buy a website, and they're thinking, all right, I need to get a content marketing strategy to make sure I can start building trust, build up this bank account, and get some credit happening. Where, for somebody who's just starting out, maybe podcasting is a bit of a stretch. Maybe recording videos is too, daunting for them, and putting them on YouTube. Would you suggest, just starting off by practicing writing some stories, edit them, and then maybe post them every now and then? What are some of the ways that you'd suggest some people starting to get that storytelling and content out there?
Yeah, I would. And I would actually just say, also think about it from an SEO perspective. I know we're talking about storytelling, but actually the concept of what's going to perform well on your website, as you know, is critical.
Huge.
So, right. And we used to be really obsessed with blogs, and I still believe in the power of blogs, or actually what we would call a content brand. So creating if you like, a magazine style approach to, stories and articles and information that will be of interest to your audience. And in fact, I guess the metaphor that I would share with you is think about a blog as your a magazine cover. And when you look at a magazine cover, it should be like a mirror. It should be a reflection of your audience. Your audience should see themselves in your content, visually. So use lots of strong images to show them, the people that are interested in my content, who are my customers, are like you. So make it quite obvious that the person has found a home. And you see that with people right across the different industries. But actually, I would recommend if you first start out with really practical, useful content, and that's as simple as Q&As, how-tos, start educating your customers. So I don't know, let's just say what's a segment, like a business.
So it could be a business that is, selling a particular type of product. Let's just choose basketballs, for example.
Right. So you want to position yourselves as the person who knows the most about basketballs, and you might do how to look after your basketball. Here's the top 5 ways to best protect your ball, keep it in a dry environment. Here's the best pumps to use, whatever it is. Yeah. And start providing information for people who are not just looking for basketballs, but they're interested in maintenance, and how to use, for example. So size of basketball. I know I got kids who play soccer, so obviously there's different size soccer balls. Yeah. So how do you choose the right soccer ball if that's the case? So think how can I help somebody? Remember I was talking about generosity. So it's not just like here's all my basketballs and how they're amazing, but how to choose the right one for you. And actually, you got to give a hat tip to BuzzFeed. They really did pioneer this idea of the top 5, the top 20.
They did.
As much as most of us kind of hate that kind of idea, I'm using that as an example of the types of strong informational style content that really appeals to people. And if you do your SEO right,
exactly,
find the topics that are underserved, that have a high search volume, and then you know that you can start making some inroads.
Because what the algorithms are really loving is featured snippets and having that list or listicle of, the top 5 or top 15 best indoor basketballs for people under 6 or whatever. And that's definitely huge for SEO. So what you're saying to your previous comment is make sure your content is, created in terms of thinking about the algorithms and getting ranked. But you can also attach great stories to each of those points or each of those basketballs. For example, SEO loves it when or the algorithms love it when you give the answers quickly, easily, and it's above fold. So at the top of the page, people don't want to go away and I'm looking to, cook dinner tonight. I want a recipe. And then they get a story that's like 3 pages long before the actual recipe comes in with the dot points. Put that stuff up the top. Same with your listicle. And then also tell the story below, because there may be people that want to consume that content. That's also important for SEO. And that does help people get more value from it, right?
Correct. The best attitude is to say, I want to write the definitive article on how to choose the right basketball, to use our example. And you'll go and study, look at all the other articles that are out there. And it's not just make it longer, but make it sharper, better, get straight to the point, define the best basketball in the first paragraph. And then, as to your point, then look at how can I build it out with a story that illustrates your point. What links can I provide to other useful content? And there's some of the tricks that help you get a snippet. So I think in a content strategy, being quite strategic, and you want to, the thing about content marketing is you need to combine great storytelling with strategy. It's not good enough anymore just to have a great story and stick it out there and hope people will find it. They just won't.
Exactly.
So, and then the last point, I think, in all of that is don't forget a call to action of some kind, which should be primarily an invitation to subscribe to updates or, to get our newsletter or however you want to position that for more great information like this. So invite people to come back for more and start building that relationship that we spoke about.
Yeah, certainly. And when you do offer that call to action, make sure it's next level valuable as well. I know that I give, just as an example, I give people a due diligence framework from, say I mentioned it in the podcast, and it helps people make sure they don't go away and buy a lemon. And a lot of people go away and download that and they get back to me. It's for free. And they just give me so much great feedback. Like, wow, this is absolutely excellent. So don't just try and get people on your list and not care about them. Like once they're on the list, it's like, cool, I've got these people I can start, sharing emails and stories to. Is like, no, keep adding value all the way, even when they do become clients, because then they're just going to help you build your brand bigger and better, and they're going to get better results, right?
Yes, correct. It is about building that emotional connection and for them to start to get to know who you are as a person, or perhaps your brand identity, that you stand for bigger than yourself. People love to join things, to be part of something. And when they sense that meaning I spoke about, that sense of purpose in your vision, where you're going, and how this piece of content contributes towards that, they kind of know how all the things fit together, if you like. And a great example of that is Patagonia, of course, do fantastic. And this is at the high end, of course, but they have a real strong purpose around sustainability, the environment, and even like to the extent of repairing old clothes. So you don't sort of, throw your jacket away when it's done. You bring it back and we'll fix it for you. And the stories of people who've done that with these, really, really old beaten up jackets, and how proud they are of them. And so in the stories of those people, you've got this interesting connection of the brand's purpose and the human beings, the real people who are experiencing the product and what impact it's had. But it's told in a way that's not sales driven. It's sort of emotively all connected up to this desire to see a greater good in the world.
And just continually adding value. I've actually read the Patagonia book. I love their products. I love their ethos, their morals, and what they actually do. And the next thing I wanted to talk about with you was branding. And what you see a really good brand do is essentially what we're talking about, is telling stories. So for somebody who, say, has bought a website and they're thinking about, hey, I want to kind of rebrand this, would you suggest starting with getting good at storytelling, working out what's important to them morally, ethically, and what their values would be in the business, and then start sharing those, and then the logo and the design can come after it? How would you sort of position this?
So this is one of my favorite things, right? And I speak with, it's actually surprising to me the number of companies that I've worked with around the world, that very large companies through to small and mid-sized businesses, they have this single number one question, which is, who are we?
Yeah.
So the question is identity. And really a brand is an identity. And, in marketing speak, we say that the brand exists as an idea in the minds of our customers or future customers.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that idea? What is that identity? What do you represent? So you really need to start with that question of, who are we? What do we stand for? What are our values? What does this brand symbolize, and represent to customers? So that has to be the start of any kind of brand work. And it's really exciting when you unlock that, when you find something. I've worked with a number of brands who have actually changed their name. We've changed their sort of positioning. It's a bit of a process. It's not sort of an instant thing. You got to do a bit of work.
Process.
You got to work with your customers to really spend time listening to them, and sort of staring at yourself in the mirror a little bit, metaphorically speaking. So start with that. Start with identity, and then you can move from there to developing out, other things. Obviously, all the basic stuff. You need a mission, a vision, you need values. And then how does your visual identity represent those ideas? So, obviously the logo creation and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of this for entrepreneurs, for visionaries, it's very gut feel. It's very like, I just know, it's in me. I've thought about this for years.
And they need to write it down. They need to, strategically have that written down so it becomes a real identity, a real thing. Actually, then start developing that into, because I've done this myself, right? I've gone and rebranded something, and I sat down with a branding agency, and we talked about identity. We went through all these things about what's the business about, what do I love, why do I love this business, what do my clients want, and why are we who we are. That came first, like you said, that identity, and then what gets created is the logo, is the brand name, and it spawns from the essence of what the business is about, who they are and what they want to achieve. And I feel that some people just go, I just want to make the logo look a bit better. I want the aesthetics of the site to look a bit better, when they can go away and spend all that money doing so, although it's not going to speak to the people that you actually want as your customers or clients. And that's a huge thing as well in itself, that you should be able to choose who you want to work with. You don't want to have to be getting people that you work with that are going to be hard to work with and cause havoc.
Yeah, no, I think the hard thing in having worked with management teams, and even with my own management team, when we did a lot of this for ourselves, you really need to understand that wordsmithing is hard, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
So you really need to sweat over every single word in your mission, your vision, your values, the uniques that you have in the marketplace, and really understand it. So the closer you can get to the heartbeat of your organization, the better place you're going to be to create a visual identity and a public identity that reflects those things. Because if there's one thing people love, it's consistency. They want to see you behaving consistently in the marketplace, according to those things that you said, you stand for that vision that you said you want to unpack, for that mission that you're, that purpose, that goal that you're trying to achieve. People want to see that come to fruition. So, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to get all of that right.
Yeah, because people could spend a little bit of time and go surface level with who they are and what they're about. Then it really is hard to be consistent with that, because you're a bit all over the shop of like, hang on, who am I to the bones? Like, what are we about to the bones? But when you go all the way to that level of depth, you can be consistent because it's in the blood of the business owner and the culture of the business as well. And I think that's a great point that you brought up. Right.
So this is why I believe that your brand is a story. So when we think about brand, we need to understand that brand is not an abstract thing. It's not a logo. It's not separate from your business. This concept, and we've been talking about this, your origin story, how this whole thing came together. The story of who you are as a group of people how you started, how you built this thing and where you're going, you are living out the brand. That is the brand. And so we need to understand that, a brand has, like every good story, different seasons, a shape, a context, highs and lows. And so how can you invite people into that in a way that is authentic, real, easy to understand, that they're the sorts of kind of strategic thinking, concepts that we've got to, really wrap around anything to do with branding.
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just one initial conversation. It's some deeper work. And I absolutely love talking about, your brand being a storytelling, and everything we've talked about. I think it's so important for all business owners to understand, because once you get that right, everything else fits in place and makes work and business so much easier. Oh, yeah. So I just want to say thank you so much, Mark, for coming on. We could talk for another 3 hours. I'm not sure people would keep their capacity to listen, but I want to say thank you so much for jumping on. Where can people go away and grab your book if they need to when it comes out, and chat with, either contact you or get in contact with you or your team?
Yeah, well, look, I'll share two URLs. So filteredmedia.com.au is my agency, and we look after large organizations with integrated marketing communications. And my personal website is markhjones.net, and that's my speaker website, and the book information is there. So check it out, and of course subscribe.
Exactly. Go away, check it out, guys. There's more great stuff coming from Mark, and everybody that is listening, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. Please go away and leave a review. And the reason I asked you to leave a review is because I want to know what you actually got from this podcast and this episode, and from the speakers I bring on. I love feedback, and I want to make sure I make this show even better with each episode as we go through. So please go away and leave some feedback, and I look forward to speaking to you on the next one. Thanks again, Mark.
All the best.